The ancient Greek word Kakon, evil, it is not what you think. In the Cratylus, Socrates gives us his interpretation of the word. Kakon, comes from Kakosion. What does that mean? Kakosion is that which moves badly, that which has a destructive trajectory. Evil isn't a demon, it is not a supernatural force, it is not something that is coming out of the darkness. It is like in the scary darkness or something. It is a movement, it is a direction. Think of it like it is the same word, ion, in physics. It is a charged particle with a specific energy and direction. If that direction is destructive, if you are moving toward disintegration, distortion, the denial of truth, this is Kakon. And this changes the whole logic of it. Evil isn't something that is imposed on you from the outside, it is a choice of direction, often unconscious and often very quiet. And here Heraclitus comes in and tells us what? He tells us that those who sleep are workers and collaborators in what happens in the world. Those who live unconsciously, drifting, indifferent, unaware, are not just innocent bystanders of life. They are active participants in whatever is unfolding around them and around everyone. You don't need evil, you just need to be totally asleep. When we say movement, we tend to think of something that is visible. An action, a decision, something we can see happening out in the world. But how many of us think that our emotions are movements, our thoughts are movements, our desires are movements, even things we don't think about when we should? That stillness is also part of movement. It is kind of like a backwards movement. Because thoughts, emotions, and desires aren't passive states. They ultimately constitute our actions. It is the movement that happens first at the invisible level. That's where it takes shape. That's where it starts finding its direction. And at some point, it crosses into the visible. And here we have another word, the word pragmatikotis. Pragmatikotis means reality. What do we think it means, reality? It is something out there, around us, something that is independent of us, something that simply is and we observe it. This is wrong. The word comes from the verb Pratto, which means to act, to do. So pragmatikotis is the pepραγμένον, which is that which has been enacted, brought into being through action. Reality isn't something sitting out there waiting for us. It is shaped and it is created. And it is created through movements, visible and invisible movements, conscious and unconscious. Depending on how conscious or unconscious you are, you get corresponding results. And this doesn't only concern the individual level. The individual conscious and unconscious meets the collective conscious and unconscious. And together they create a vast network of interaction. What we call our world is the result of that network. And then something else that Gurdjieff has said. Many people say, yeah, fine, okay, ordinary people are asleep. But somewhere out there at the top, there are those who control everything, who know what they are doing, the Anunnaki, the aliens, the Illuminati, and so on, who conspire consciously. And yes, conspiracies exist. No one disputes that. But Gurdjieff is saying something much deeper and much more disturbing, that even those at the top of the pyramid, the leaders, the powerful, those who seemingly pull the strings, are also asleep, also unconscious, driven by the same passions, the same fears, the same ignorance, just with more power in their hands. This means that we are not dealing with a system that is controlled by someone who is awake at the top. We are dealing with a vast network of sleepwalkers, moving other sleepwalkers. And the system runs almost automatically. Not because someone designed it perfectly, but it is pretty well designed, but because no one is awake enough to stop it. And something else. The ancient Greek city-states at their peak knew this, and they had built multiple safeguards, specifically. My dog, hold on a minute, sorry. We had a little incident. They had multiple safeguards to prevent the unconscious from ultimately prevailing. Safeguards that exist nowhere in the world today. Before taking office, an archon underwent an examination, scrutinized by the council and the courts, and after their term, they gave a full account of every decision they have ever made. There was no impunity, there was accountability. Then we have the liturgies, the public liturgies, which obligated the wealthy to fund the public expenses from their own pockets. Worships, theatrical festivals, public celebrations. We needed to build something or whatever, that kind of thing. So wealth wasn't simply a privilege, it was an obligation to the city. And something else that no one really mentions today about the city-states. Direct taxation was considered deeply shameful for a free citizen. It was incompatible with their dignity. Think about that. Today we tax the worker at the base and let large fortunes, corporations, whatever, banks find their escape routes. The Greeks did the exact opposite. There was also the scrutiny of property. Before and after office, you declared what you owned. You left richer, you had to explain how. And then we had ostracism. A very interesting idea. If someone became excessively powerful, even if they had done nothing illegal, the city would exile them for 10 years. This was not a punishment, it was prevention, because they understood that the excessive concentration of power is itself a movement toward Kakon, regardless of intentions. Above all of this, though, there was something much more fundamental: pedia, education. And the word pedia from pedi, child. The formation began in childhood, as today. But what kind of formation is happening today? It wasn't simply the transmission of knowledge, it was the cultivation of consciousness. Learning how to remain awake in your life, how to remain conscious, to think, to question, to examine, to know yourself, all these things we talked about, the movements. That was the first and greatest safeguard, because a society of awake citizens doesn't actually need as many external controls. It kind of governs itself. Over the centuries, control was lost. The safeguards fell one by one. Pedia stopped meaning what it meant. It became education, training for obedience rather than cultivation of consciousness, and eventually the unconscious prevailed, not through a coup, although coups happened, but a slow, gradual, quiet movement, the Kakosion. This is why Plato said that the root of every bad action is ignorance. Simple, everyday ignorance. Not knowing who you are, not knowing what you are worth, and which way you are moving, visibly and invisibly. Change never begins at the top. It begins where it always begins, with one person who decides to wake up. And the key takeaway of this is what is moving inside you right now, and what reality is it building?